today celebrate the unique history of this house and its occupants. It is a high honor to receive an award from the Texas Historical Commission such as this. Now, the Taylor Cupper House not only represents the success of one of the earliest Georgetown families, but also the city's economic development. M.Z. Taylor purchased these 8 lots at this location to construct a new home for his growing family. Built between 1969 to 1970 with ashlar limestone, the original construction was a single-story central passage house with 2-foot thick exterior stone walls. Common in the national folk style, this design combined a central hall that divided the rooms in the house. The house had many firsts for Georgetown, including a bathtub with running hot water and a private telephone line. Many of the original outbuildings remain on this property. An open barrack-style loft was added about 1880. This may have been when the hot water heater and the running hot water in the kitchen was also added. Well, have you ever wished that the walls could talk? Well, the letters and journals of the owners of this house can. Each of the owners kept journals, and they saved every single receipt and letter. This house was built by M.Z. Taylor, as you heard, who taught himself to read and write while working in his father's mercantile store located on the Georgetown Square. The town was a bit rowdier then, and M.Z. sometimes slept on the counter holding a gun to protect against the desperados. M.Z. enlisted as a Confederate Army, as you heard, in 1861, and proudly served in Hood's Texas Brigade. As the company was departing Round Rock, the beautiful Margaret Corinna Henderson presented a banner made by the ladies of Round Rock. In her stirring remarks, she said, "I present you this flag on behalf of the ladies of Round Rock, with a hopeful assurance that it will never be disgraced by the gallant company to whom I present it. Never may its brightness be dimmed or trampled in the dust, till 15 stars shall shine where now but 11 graces folds. If you should be called to bear this banner to the battlefield, may we soon have the pleasure of greeting its triumphant return in the midst of the brave band who has had the honor to assist in gaining our independence as a nation." Now, Taylor fought in Virginia until he became very ill, as you heard. He lost 86 pounds due to consumption and was discharged for disability 5 months later. He returned to Georgetown to recuperate and apparently regained his health quickly, because while there, he met Margaret Corinna Henderson, the same young woman who presented the banner to his company as it was departing. When she was serving as the Mayfair Queen in Round Rock, black-haired M.Z. fell in love with the beautiful blonde and frequently rode his horse to Round Rock to court her. Cora, as he called her, had many suitors, but M.Z. won her heart because instead of bringing her chocolates, he brought oranges, which were quite a rarity for her younger siblings. They married July 7th, 1864, and settled here in Georgetown. Cora was born in Tennessee and came to Texas at the age of 1856. She was in 1856 at the age of 12, with her widowed grandmother Mays as a young child. She and her 4 siblings were orphaned very young. Grandmother Mays must have been quite a woman herself, as she sold everything she had in Tennessee, removed the seats from the wagon, and filled it with crates of vegetables and other supplies necessary for establishing a home on the wild Texas frontier. After regaining his health, M.Z. organized an infantry company that became part of the 16th Texas Infantry under the command of Colonel George Flournoy. And the company fought in a series of battles along the Red River in Louisiana that were known as the Red River Campaign, and there he rose to the rank of captain. He wrote frequently to Cora with updates on the men with whom he served. In one letter, he wrote, "I employ all my idle moments in writing to you and thinking about you. I dream of you when I'm sleeping, and I think of you when waking. You are ever with me, consoling and cheering me in my trials, and often I am restrained from doing wrong by the thought of you. You are so innocent, pure, and good, that no matter how angry I might be, a smile from your lovely face is sufficient to restore me to good humor, even when I can only see that face in memory's faithful glass." The war ended a few months later, and M.Z. returned to Georgetown. and then soon after his father's death in 1868, he took over his store and then began construction on this house. The house was originally built as a one-story native limestone dwelling with 2-foot thick exterior walls. The house had many firsts for Georgetown, as I mentioned, with the bathtub and the telephone line, and many of the outbuildings still remain on the property. MC was not only self-taught, but he was very ambitious. When Anne has her great-grandmother's mental portraits book, copyright of 1884, and the first entry was by our MC Taylor, who wrote, under my pet hobby, he wrote, Georgetown Advancement. Taylor inherited the business after his father's death and figured prominently in Georgetown's growth after the Civil War. He was instrumental in bringing what is now Southwestern University to Georgetown, also helped initiate the local Chautauqua organization, which brought renowned speakers and entertainers to Georgetown beginning in 1889. He and Cora were committed to providing college educations for their children and their grandchildren, which was certainly unique in that era. Among other things, he started the railroad, the electrical works, but his most proud achievement, as you've heard, was organizing the first fire department, the Hook and Ladder. He served as the chief of the company at a time when the fire truck called Captain MZ was pulled to the fires by mules. No matter what was going on in Georgetown in the 1870s and 80s, MZ Taylor was probably involved in it. In the early 1880s, he sold his mercantile business and opened a private bank that became the First National Bank of Georgetown. Associated with him in this bank were his son Lee Taylor, his son-in-law R.T. Cooper, and R.T.'s brother J.E. Cooper, among others. Now J.E. decided to leave the bank when he published the first newspaper, the Williamson County Sun, on May 19, 1877, 142 years ago today. MC's other enterprises included a waterworks, which started in 1877, and he later sold it to the city of Georgetown, a nursery business located on the city of Georgetown's dog park. According to Claire Scarborough's book on the history of Williamson County, the nursery shipped locally grown produce as far as Colorado. MC was quite the horticulturist. He had some of the first irrigated truck farms and planted pecan trees just south of the San Gabriel within the city limits. He loved to cultivate roses, and it is said there was one rose with over 50 grafts on it. Taylor recognized the value of railroads to the growing community and helped establish the Georgetown Railroad Company, which brought the railroad from Round Rock to Georgetown in 1878. He promoted another rail line to connect Georgetown to Granger, but the project was beset with financial difficulties following the financial panic of 1893. That may be what led to MC Taylor to take his own life on June 29, 1895, at the age of 54. An obituary from the Round Rock Republican at the time of his death said one of the longest, if not one of the largest processions that ever was in Georgetown followed his remains to the burial ground. In a fitting front page tribute, the Williamson County Sun wrote, "He is gone from among us, but the memory of his kindly heart and generous deeds will long remain. To the poor and needy, he was a genuine friend, and his purse was always open in times of distress. No deserving appeal was unheeded by him, and his benefactions knew not creed, race, or sect. Many are the men in this town who declare he was their best friend, a friend who gave help when most needed. Many are the persons whose eyes will moisten with tears when they read this sketch, think of his untimely end, and recall the warm grasp of his hand and his cheering word of sympathy. Few of her citizens could Georgetown have worse fared, for few of them possess his public spirit and daring genius that reek not of discouragement and obstacles." Despite the shock of her husband's untimely death, Cora eventually managed to repay all of the investors of the bank in full, of the railroad in full. Now, they had a daughter named Cora who married R.T. Cooper, who you heard was a cashier at the bank, and they were the second generation in this house. Cora began a public library in the house when books were displayed in floor-to-ceiling bookcases in the library. A large atlas was displayed on the table in the middle of the room. Great-grandson Ted Waterston has a ledger begun in 1908 listing every book checked out and returned. The journal is inscribed to my beloved husband. This volume is affectionately inscribed by his devoted wife. In in memory of a wish many times expressed, January 13, 1908. Many rare first edition books still remain in this house. The Cuppers were fortunate enough to receive some funds when Spindletop came in, and they were able to finish the remodeling, which MZ began in the 1880s. They enclosed and connected the outdoor kitchen to the main house, added beautiful woodwork. The upstairs loft was converted into bedrooms for the growing family, and a stucco veneer was placed on the exterior of the original limestone. They added a portico that wrapped around the south and east sides of the house, columns, a formal dining room, and many other elements typical of the Greek Revival style. While different from the limestone of the original construction, the 1900 editions of the house have a white wood exterior, a characteristic of Greek Revival. A large high ceiling room added in the back of the house, and the original front door was moved to the back. The hand-turned doorbell still works. R.T. and Cora's daughter, Katie, was the third generation to own the home. Katie was a teacher, and her husband Thomas Lee was a superintendent of schools. In fact, he was honored with a marker which is now in the front yard. Katie was 9 months pregnant with her third child when her husband Thomas died unexpectedly. And tragically, she lost her baby 3 days later. However, she returned to school for a degree in library science in order to support her family. When Anne recalls in the evenings after the dishes were washed, the men retired to discuss whatever it is they talk about, and the ladies retired to the porch to catch the breeze and visit. It was Katie Cooper Lee and her 3 sisters, Bessie Bell Cooper McMillan, Corinna Cooper Hall, and Madge Cooper Quipido, who sat on the porch swing and shared family stories with Anne and her cousins back in the day when children should be seen and not heard. Now, Ted Waterston also recalls the old outbuildings out back from the days before indoor plumbing and the addition of the kitchen. They would find treasures stored in the old laundry room, such as an old rusted rifle, boxes of old canceled checks. They would play bank robber, using the canceled checks as the loot, echoing the memory of Sam Bass. Ted was fascinated by the 3-hole outhouse, and he imagined the sisters all using it at the same time. Fortunately for all of us, when Anne remembers these stories and shares them with the generations that have followed her. Now, when Anne's mother, Catherine Lee, was the 4th generation owner. She and her husband, Thomas Stone, were childhood sweethearts at Georgetown High School. Catherine attended college in North Texas, and Thomas was the center on the Southwestern football team when they won the Sun Bowl in 1944. He served our country in the Navy for over 20 years before he died of cancer at the age of 39. Catherine outlived her husband and 2 of her children and passed to her heavenly reward in 2016. MZ and Cora Taylor's great-great-granddaughter, Mary Winann Ewing, and her husband, William E. Ewing, currently reside in the house, which was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1986. She and her husband, Bill, have been devoted to this house since moving here in the 1980s. She recalls that the rooms were so full because no one ever moved out, and that it was only possible to walk in 2 of them. One of the beautiful antiques in this home is the wardrobe, which belonged to Sam Houston's wife, Margaret Lee Houston. Their oldest daughter, Nancy Houston Morrow, had fallen on hard times. She came to Winann's paternal grandmother, Mary Stone, who agreed to rent her a room at her home located nearby. So Nancy Houston Morrow was unable to pay rent, so in exchange she gave Mary Stone her mother's wardrobe. Also in the house is Mary Stone's wedding bed with a heart-shaped iron headboard in which several generations of this family were born. Winann is a 5th generation owner. After earning a PhD, she planned to use her scientific education to find a cure for cancer. But that was not the path for which she was destined. You see, in every generation, there is one who is chosen. There is an anonymous saying that says, in each family, there is one who seems called to find the ancestors, to put flesh on their bones and make them live again, to tell the family story and to feel that somehow they know and approve. Winann is the chosen one. And she has preserved their stories, their treasures, and their home. And it has been difficult to hold on to this property located in such a desirable area. Her children and her grandchildren have lived in this home, making 7 generations here. While much has changed in the 150 years since the house was built, much has stayed the same. They still use the transom and cross ventilation to cool the house. They still sit on the porch and they tell stories of the family. The roof gutters still collect the rainwater, filter it through charcoal, and store it in the cistern for use on the many plants which Bill nurtures. They still hand wash the dishes. The 150-year-old Lady Banks rose, which MZ planted before the house was complete, still greets visitors as they approach the front door. And the thermal-lined silver pitcher still sits on a small table near the door to provide cool water for any who may stop by to visit on the porch. They still save everything related to the family. And that was extremely helpful in documenting the history of this house for the Texas Historical Commission. If these walls could indeed talk, they would tell you about the progressive businessmen who had such an impact on Georgetown. And they would tell you about the strong women who valued education and nurtured future generations. Which reminds me of the saying, strong women, may we know them, may we be them, and may we raise them. If these walls could talk, they would tell you about Win Ann's very good ancestors, and they would tell you that Win Ann is a very good ancestor herself, as she sits on the porch telling stories of her family. So today, let us be grateful to Win Ann and the 7 generations who have preserved this historic home. So what kind of ancestor will you be? Will you explore your own family history and share the stories of your ancestors with your family? Will you put flesh on their bones and make them live again to tell the family story and feel somehow they know and approve? May we learn more of these stories of those who came before us, and may we share them with our children and our grandchildren. May we also be good ancestors, as were the occupants of this historic home.